Hello and welcome back to CQ, the AWS Certification Quiz Show, where we're going to take a second peep at our AWS Security exam, so one of our specialty exams. Today I've got with me Paul Hawkins. Paul, I'm so glad you're here with me. Why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about what you do at AWS?
Hi, it's great to be here. I'm a security solutions architect with AWS, which is a really cool job because I get to talk to a whole bunch of customers. Pretty much my role is I help customers with security risk and compliance in the cloud, which covers a pretty broad range of stuff. So this could be helping them understand KMS, helping them understand how to write WAF rules, helping them deal with compliance in their organization, how to kind of get compliance attestations, how to think about security generally. And because I'm a specialist, I get to work with really big customers, people doing regulated workloads on AWS, startups, people in between, digital native, kind of ISVs. I get to see loads of different customer problems, which is a really good way of helping other customers understand how to be more secure in the cloud. So it's a pretty exciting job. So
not a customer you're not helping, basically. Security, number one.
Security is kind of everyone's job as well. And one of the things that we talk to customers about a lot is kind of the culture of security. It's no longer the job of one bunch of people who kind of turn up at the end and say, you're not doing that right, or you're doing that right.
Yep.
Security is something that everyone can do. So helping security teams in organizations scale as their developers are building applications, as they're kind of trying to move fast and stay secure, how can we help them do that, and how can they help their business, and how can security be an enabler? So it's a really exciting time for security.
Cool. Buzzwords, anything exciting in particular happen in your patch right now, Paul?
There's a couple of things. A lot of customers are looking at incident response. So how can they respond to things going in a way that's not as good as they hoped? We hope everyone has a good day in the cloud, but sometimes kind of things happen. Yeah. So yeah.
And that's you, ready to fix?
We help customers prepare. Automation is super important. So helping customers understand how to automate security responses, how they can kind of keep the humans away from the data, how when humans do have to get involved, they've already got a bunch of information and they're kind of ready to get in and kind of start fixing problems. So a lot of people focusing on incident response at the moment. And at the other end of the kind of NIST spectrum, a lot of people doing things with identity. As AWS, we've updated some features around service control policies and identity and access management, which makes it easier to do kind of more granular configuration of your environments. So the security invariants, as we sometimes call them, the kind of non-negotiable security things you want to build into your platform. A lot of people leaning into identity and seeing how they can grant enough access for people to build stuff, but making sure they've got those guardrails in place. So those are kind of the two kind of exciting things that are happening a lot at the moment.
Awesome. So you've got big shoes to fill, Paul. We had Pierre on a few weeks ago when we did our first look at the security exam, and he nailed it. Are you ready to take it on?
I saw Pierre's show. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. I learned some stuff from it. I'm going to take a slightly different approach to Pierre. We're not in a taxi. So
okay, yeah, well, for a start, yep.
But yeah, I'm excited to crack on.
I'm excited to have you, Paul. Okay, so just a reminder, it is the security exam today, one of our specialty exams. We've took questions from a bit of everywhere, the SysOps official guide, the Associate Architect official guide. So, Paul, are you ready?
I am ready.
Awesome. Question 1, Cloud Trail. Great place to start.
Yeah, Cloud Trail is one of our best practices. Turn on Cloud Trail everywhere. You can kind of see API calls in your environment.
So you better get this one right, basically.
Yes.
All right, question 1. AWS Cloud Trail logs the API requests to AWS resources within your account. Which other AWS service can be used in conjunction with Cloud Trail to capture information about changes made to resources in your AWS account?
Cool. I like this question a lot because it's got a couple of things. It mentions Cloud Trail, which isn't one of the answers, but it's reinforcing kind of one of our best practices, which is turn on Cloud Trail everywhere, store the Cloud Trail logs in another account in an S3 bucket with limited permission. when you're kind of studying for the security exam, looking at the AWS best practices, looking at the cloud adoption framework and the well-architected framework is a really good baseline because it gives you kind of the broad context of where the questions are going to be. So
okay, we might get Producer John to put those links in the chat for all of you viewing online.
Awesome. Thank you, Producer John. But to the question. So Cloud Trail's logging the API requests. Cool. And when you're doing exams, one, read the question. It's a very simple tip. I think a lot of people have used this tip, but make sure you read the question, try and work out what the question is trying to get you to answer. So which other AWS service can be used in conjunction with Cloud Trail? So we're looking for something that complements Cloud Trail.
Yeah.
We're looking at something that's capturing information about changes made to resources in your AWS account. So we know kind of generally where we are when we're looking at this question. Snapshots are a way of capturing some information, but that's very specific to kind of EBS volumes. So that seems a bit too specific for what we're talking about here. VPC flow logs is a very good service. It gives you a bunch of information about network flows. That's another quite specific source of information. VPC flow logs gives you kind of net flow information. You can turn it on, dumps information into an S3 bucket, and then you can look at that kind of to see, is there anything odd going on in my network? Really useful and interesting, but not really giving me information about changes made to resources in my account.
Yeah, okay.
Artifact, a way of self-serving compliance attestations. I know compliance attestations are something you're very keen on. Compliance it's a pretty exciting topic. Demonstrating that you've actually done the things you said you've done.
Great service.
So I think by a process of elimination, this leads us to AWS Config.
Which I saw that you left out. What is AWS Config, Paul?
AWS Config is a service that gives you historical view of configuration information of the resources in your AWS account. And it's got a few different components. You can go into the console. You can see kind of the history of resources. It's also got things called config rules. And config rules are great because they can be triggered on change of state of resource or kind of on a kind of regular schedule. A lot of the customers that I work with use config, a combination of the managed config rules or custom rules they've written themselves to trigger on change of state of bits of their environment and either notify someone that something's changed or trigger some kind of automated response. And this is a really good way of doing repetitive tasks in response to actions where traditionally you would kind of page someone or email someone and then they'd go and log on to something and make a change. You can use config to not only give you information about changes made to resources, which is the answer to the question, but also then kind of do other automated security tasks. So
awesome.
Config
sounds like the perfect complement.
Yeah, config is an awesome service and it's also the answer to this question.
It is the answer, is it? So you're locking in number 2.
I'm
you're
confident.
that confident. I don't think someone's told me that before. That's perfect. Number 2 it is, thank goodness. All right, we have a question online. When are you going to make a video quiz about the developer certification? Great question. We are actually working on that right now, so that should be out in the next couple of months or so. We will be looking at the dev exam. We also have, is there a bug bounty program besides just emailing aws-security@amazon.com?
I think if you do see something, emailing AWS-security@amazon.com is the best approach to that.
Awesome. Everyone has questions for you today. Are more publications coming down the pipeline similar for the recent AWS Security IR guide that was released in June?
Yeah, we try and kind of regularly refresh more prescriptive information. The IR guide was really good. Came out June, I think it is. Been getting a lot of good feedback from customers looking at the IR guide. Other good places to look is the kind of the well-architected labs on GitHub, which is a good way to get hands-on with AWS, preparing for the exam, and just generally getting better at the platform. Getting hands-on with the technology is a really good way of learning. So kind of read the IR guide, look at the stuff in the GitHub labs, go through some of these examples yourself. But yeah, we're going to try and keep pushing out more and more information to help people understand the platform more.
Perfect. Thanks, Paul. Let's move on to question number 2. S3. Okay. Your company requires that all data sent to external storage be encrypted before being sent. Which Amazon S3 encryption solution will meet this requirement?
Cool. So again, let's have a look at the question, see what we think we're actually trying to understand here. So company requires all data sent to external storage be encrypted before being sent.
One key word there, I reckon.
Yeah. What do you reckon the key word is?
I'm going to go with a before.
Excellent.
Yes.
This is why you're running the show. Yeah, encrypted before being sent is the key thing to pull out here. So
Okay.
This is going to help us understand the answers to the questions. All of the answers are kind of encryption in S3. You should protect your data using encryption. Encryption is a great way of protecting data. There's a few different options there. There's some server-side encryption things. There's a client-side encryption one. And for the server-side encryption things, there's different ways of managing the keys. So SSE KMS, KMS keys. So KMS is our key management service. So AWS manages the underlying infrastructure for the key management service, and you make API calls to it. It integrates with a whole range of AWS services, including S3, and allows you to, either with a checkbox in the console or with a kind of line of CloudFormation, protect data at rest by taking advantage of the KMS service.
Mm-hmm.
So, and within the KMS service, there's a few different ways of managing the keys. There's AWS managed keys, there's customer managed keys, or you can even bring your own keys and import those into the KMS service.
So just a quick note, fully split on the poll for this question, Paul. We got people choosing all answers.
It's looking...
I haven't seen that before, actually. Thanks, Mr. Bob, for letting me know that was happening.
Looking like it's a bit of everything, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So I think going back to the kind of the key before being sent. So what we're talking about here is encrypting the data before it's being sent to the storage medium. So I think the key leads us to the client-side encryption with customer managed keys, which is
basically before it ever gets to us.
Yeah. So if you've got something that's, say, on EC2, you can encrypt it and then send it to storage. You're just storing an encrypted blob of stuff, and then you need to have access to the keys, but it's being handled before you write to the storage medium. Some of the server-side encryption approaches, you send the data in plain text and then it gets encrypted as it's stored and written to the storage medium. So I'm going to go slightly less positively than I was with the first question. I'm going to go with number 3.
Just edged out on the poll, but still very split. You didn't convince enough people, Paul.
Oh.
Here we go.
See what we say.
Number 3 it was. Whew.
And that was, looking at the poll, that was the most popular answer.
Only just though. All right, let's move on to geo-blocking. Okay. Your company is running a gaming server in India. The service receives and processes UDP requests on a certain port. The service has started receiving DDoS attacks from outside of India on that port. Which service can be used to block non-Indian UDP traffic? Good question. I like this one.
This is an interesting question because it's got a few different things in it. It's talking about a service that is popular to be run on AWS. There's a whole bunch of gaming-specific services that we offer, and geo-blocking is an interesting topic. A lot of companies want to know that they're only receiving traffic from certain regions, or they may only operate in certain territories. So this is a good question for that. Looking at the question, I think UDP is an important thing. If I'm looking at this as I'm taking an exam, I'm kind of going, why did they specifically mention
UDP traffic?
Yeah. So that's probably going to be relevant for the answer to the question. I don't think the specific port isn't going to be so relevant, but the fact it's UDP is definitely interesting. The service has started receiving distributed denial of service attacks from outside of India, so they've kind of identified as part of some kind of monitoring or something that these attacks are coming from outside of a particular region. So they want to make sure that kind of their customers in that region are not impacted by this. So let's have a look at the answers. So we've got CloudFront with geo restrictions, WAF geographic match, VPC security groups, or the gaming service blocking the traffic itself.
Okay. A lot going for number 1. Actually, it's just switched now between number 1 and 2 at the minute.
Okay, cool. So let's step through them in order. So we've got.
I do like the geo restrictions.
Yeah.
Number 1. It sounds good.
It sounds good. CloudFront, CDN service, great way of serving content closer to your users. Unfortunately, for this particular answer, it's kind of HTTP traffic, so it's not going to be serving UDP. So you can do geo blocking with CloudFront, but not for the particular protocol we're talking about here. So it's good for other parts of this particular environment, maybe kind of sign up pages and stuff, but not for the UDP stuff. WAF geographic match. WAF operates in a couple of ways. You can attach a WAF ACL to a CloudFront distribution, which is kind of called the global WAF, or you can attach WAF to particular resources, regional resources.
Okay.
So things like application load balancers. Application load balancers operate higher up the stack at kind of layer 7. They're not going to be processing UDP traffic. So while you can do kind of geo stuff with AWS WAF, you wouldn't be able to attach it to something like a network load balancer, which would be able to pass UDP traffic.
Okay.
VPC security groups.
No one going for this one?
Well, the other part of the question is distributed denial of service attacks. So security groups are good for doing microsegmentation and ensuring that only certain traffic is reaching your environment, but it's not going to necessarily address the question around DDoS. So I think this kind of leads us to the last question, which is the gaming service will need to block the traffic itself via some kind of part of the application that the company's building. So identifying where traffic is coming from, dropping that traffic for origins outside of India.
Just thinking though, what about AWS Shield?
That's a really good question, because Shield is something that you kind of get for free, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. If you're serving content through CloudFront or Route 53, you get layer 3 or 4 DDoS protection with AWS Shield. This kind of gives you protection against the kind of volumetric noise that you see a lot on the internet, kind of TCP redirection flood type attacks, all that sort of stuff. There's also a service called Shield Advanced, which is functionally the same as Shield, but it gives you access to the DDoS response team and gives you some better metrics around what's going on, a bit more of a managed assistance in responding.
Okay.
So it's super useful for DDoS protection, but wouldn't necessarily apply in this particular case. It's kind of an adjunct to the CloudFront answer.
So locking in number 4?
I'm going to lock in number 4.
All right, let's reveal the answer. Number 4 it is. Thank you, Paul. On a roll. Let's move on to question number 4. IAM roles. Are you ready? Got a long one here. All right. You wish to copy data directly between Amazon S3 buckets. The data will be copied from bucket A in another organization's AWS account to bucket B in your AWS account. You manage account B and you have given permission to assume an IAM role in account A that has read permissions on bucket A and write permissions on bucket B. Are you following?
Yes.
Just about. However, the copy is failing. What could be the cause?
I really like IAM questions. And I think...
you're welcome.
Thank you very much. It's almost like we prepared this. And one of the things in the security exam, you're going to need to understand the relationship between kind of IAM roles, resource policies, how to grant access to resources in AWS. If you step through the sections of the security perspective of the Cloud Adoption Framework, the first one is identity, because it's a foundational control in AWS. So really kind of do your revision and do your research around kind of how all of these things relate to each other. So for the question, you want to copy data between S3 buckets. Cool. Copying in from bucket A to bucket B. So you're managing B, and you've been granted permission to assume a role into an account that has read permissions on bucket A and write permissions on bucket B. So So you'll be going into this role in account A and doing this copy. So you're going to be kind of, and you've got read from bucket A and write to bucket B.
Yep.
So it's kind of taking a blob of stuff from A, running it to B, but the copy is failing. So to understand this question, we need to kind of understand what you need to do to grant access to resources across AWS accounts.
Okay.
So
I assume that's what you're about to talk us through.
Hopefully so. So we can immediately discount 4, because you can definitely copy data between AWS accounts.
Hope so.
Well, it's kind of a pretty common thing. You've got some data somewhere, you want to move it somewhere else. Also, one of the great things about kind of multiple accounts in an AWS organization is that you have to explicitly grant permission to do stuff between accounts. Kind of, we operate on a kind of deny by default. So we've done some of that. We've granted permission to read from bucket A and write to bucket B. So we know that 4 is definitely not the case. Moving up to 3, you can only assume an IAM role in your account. That's not true, because with a series of accounts that you own, one of the patterns we see is people have an identity account where they kind of authenticate users, and then those users can assume roles into other accounts to do work. So we know that we can assume a role across account. I think that might have come up in Pierre's.
I was literally just having a bit of a deja vu moment, actually.
Yeah. So Pierre covered a lot of the stuff around kind of assuming roles as well, which is cool. Bucket policy on bucket B is not granting right access to the IAM role.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Yep.
Might have a look at 1 and then come back to that as well. Bucket A is not configured to assume the IAM role. So I reckon it's between 1 and 2.
Okay. On the poll, majority of people actually have locked in number 2.
Okay. So let's look at 2. So bucket policy on bucket B is not granting right access to the IAM role. Okay, so what we need to remember when we're talking about roles and cross-account, both accounts need to grant access to the thing you want to do.
Yep.
So you've got the IAM role that you've assumed in account A, so you've got permissions to read and permissions to write, but that's a role that exists in account A. What you also need to have in place is something in account B that also grants access, because when you evaluate the policies, as soon as you get to an implicit deny, which not having a bucket policy granting right access, you're gonna prevent it. So I think we're going to go with the excellent folk on the poll who are saying
number 2.
Saying number 2.
Did they convince you, or did you convince them? I'm just not sure in this instance, Paul.
I think we got there together.
Oh, okay, I like it. All right, let's reveal the answer. Number 2 it is. Whew. And actually, before we go on to question 5, I think that might be a good time to bring in our guest exam tip of the week.
Awesome.
Are you happy to give us a tip?
Yes.
Let's do it. Personal tip of the week for your next exam. Go, Paul.
For the security exam, because it's testing the breadth of knowledge of security in AWS around the services, a really good place to start is the well-architected framework and the cloud adoption framework. And the security perspective has 5 components. So it starts off, as we mentioned, with identity, because that's kind of foundational control. It's the first thing you do if you kind of spun up an account. Next thing is visibility. So this is like the Cloud Trail question or the config question. What's going on in my environment? Then it moves on to infrastructure protection. This covers a lot of the networking stuff. So kind of the WAF, it's a good example of that.
Yep.
Then data protection.
There's too many WAFs going on. I'm so confused between firewalls, well-architected.
I think we need more acronyms.
Oh, yeah, we do.
More
Absolutely.
acronyms, pure acronyms. Fourth one is data protection, which you can summarize by encrypt all the things. KMS is an amazing service. Also, the KMS white paper is a super good read about how we handle all of the...
Don't think we got that one in there. Producer John, KMS white paper, please.
How we handle the key material. And then the fifth one is incident response, which was something we're seeing a lot of customers focusing on. So if you kind of understand where the various AWS security services fit in across those 5 categories, and you make sure that you're kind of spreading your revision across those, you should be in good state to take the security exam.
Perfect.
That is
Thank
my
you so
tip
much.
of the week.
I love it. Thank you so much. Let's jump back into the questions. Question 5, VPC. Are you ready?
Yes.
You notice significant traffic coming from an IP address in a foreign country in which your country does not have customers. Further investigation indicates that the source of the traffic is scanning for open ports on your Amazon EC2 instances. Which of the following can deny the traffic from reaching the instances? Nice.
Cool. And one of the ways that you may find out that open ports are being scanned is you'll see a guard duty finding.
Okay.
So Amazon guard duty, the T-shirt of which I am wearing.
Good.
Thought I'd
Nice
plug my own T-shirt. Is one of my favorite AWS services. It does kind of manage threat intelligence and gives you a bunch of findings. So it's consuming information from the platform and giving you actionable insights. And one of the things that you would see is traffic is scanning open ports, and you may want to deny that. So this is kind of a really relevant question that is something that customers do.
Okay, perfect.
We talk to customers about this all the time. How do you take this information and what should you do? So you want to be denying the traffic from reaching the instances. Instances plural, so that's a good trigger that you want to be able to make a change that's impacting multiple things.
Yep.
You've identified an IP address, so it's some configuration update. So we've got a few things in there. I think Global Accelerator, while is a really useful service, isn't something that's necessarily what we're going to be looking at in this particular example. NAT gateway is more kind of address translation. We're not blocking anything with the NAT gateway, which leads us again to kind of two sort of similar answers. We've got security groups and we've got network ACLs.
100% gone for your ACL.
And why do we think? why do we think that the audience has gone fully for network ACLs? I think it's because they've looked at the question and they've picked up the same thing that we've picked up. They've picked up instances, and they've thought that how can I make a change that's going to prevent traffic from reaching all of the things inside my VPC. So network ACL, you can add a deny rule for a particular IP address, and then whatever the security group configuration kind of that's inside that VPC, that's going to deny traffic. So again, I think our audience is doing very well. They've gone to. I'm going to go with the audience.
Going with the audience. Number 2. Number 2 it is. I think we've got time for one more question, Paul, if you're all right with that.
Yep.
Authentication, sound good?
It does. Do I have to speak quickly?
No, I think we're doing all right. We're doing all right. You wish to allow your developers to assume an IAM role to make API calls, but you do not want to give them an access key and secret key in case their computers are compromised. How can developers assume the IAM role?
Cool. And this is kind of similar to what we were talking about previously with kind of assuming roles potentially across accounts. So we want to make have a situation where people have the ability to make API calls, build applications, spin up resources. We want to make sure that the credentials that they use are protected.
Yeah.
The question says make API calls. So I think that means we can probably discount use their management console username and password.
Agreed.
While you can assume roles from the console, it's a slightly different context from this particular question. Configure the IAM role for unauthenticated access.
People liking this one on the poll?
Unauthenticated access doesn't seem like a particularly good idea in terms of like a foundational security principle of understand who's accessing your environment. Isn't really kind of like configure a role for unauthenticated access isn't really a thing. So then we're down to 2 again. Assume the role using temporary credentials. It sort of describes the process that you go through. So we've said that the developers want to assume a role, but they're going to need some credentials in order to call assume role. They will get temporary credentials, so that's kind of the outcome, but that's not really it's not really the full answer to the question there. So then we've got federate using a web identity provider. And this is a really good pattern because what this means is that you can do authentication of users with your kind of identity provider. And as part of that authentication process, those users will land in a role with temporary credentials. So then they'll be able to have the ability to make API calls, but the credentials that are vended under the covers are temporary.
Okay.
But they won't need access to an access key and a secret key in order to make that initial assume role call, because the authentication will be handled by the identity provider.
Sounds perfect.
So I'm gonna go with number 1 for the answer to this question.
Locking in, last answer of the day, number 1. Yeah.
Yep, that's where I'm going.
Number 1 it is. Paul, thank you so much for being with us today on CQ.
Thank you
We'll
very much.
debrief with Pierre afterwards and check who did it better, right?
We will have we will have a strong discussion about. I reckon it was a high-scoring draw.
Maybe. We'll see. We'll
Okay.
see. Guys, we will see you back next week on CQ for another go at prepping you for your next AWS exam. Thank you.